All right, y'all. I'm sure there will be some people that are, joining as we go along, but why don't we go ahead and get started? Jeff, Tasha,
Sounds good. Welcome,
perfect.
everyone. I hope everyone's ready for a interactive kind of Ask the Expert. We don't really have much of a slideshow. It's more of a Q&A. We've been fielding a lot of questions lately about H-2B rates and that kind of stuff now that most are on site. And we get this every year, but we figured we'd just have a chance to all discuss it together. And I'll give you kind of a 1,000-foot picture of the rates. So why do we tell you what the rates are versus, usually negotiate with your local team members that you hire? Bottom line is, as most of you know, we need to be compliant. That's the main reason. Immigration and Nationality Act requires that the hiring of the foreign worker will not adversely affect the wages and working conditions of U.S. workers comparatively employed. So once we've kind of decided what our needs are going to be, we have to obtain a prevailing wage determination from the government. And we do this by filling out a government form 9141. The prevailing wage rate is the average wage paid to similarly employed workers in a specific occupation in the area of the intended employment. So obviously it varies by industry, by position, and not just by state, but by area of the state. So the Department of Labor provides that data and assigns the rate of pay. So they're assigning the rates, not Gary. Why is it important to stick to this? Well, they kind of determine what the rate should be. So if we override that for some reason, and there are many legit reasons, increased responsibilities, they return year over year. You just want to give them a bump because they're a great employee. All understandable, but we need to be able to justify that. Paying foreign team members more than we would someone that is just coming off the street. So, although exceptions can be made and they're rare, and they need to be approved by us so that we can track and be ready for when we're audited. So we obviously want to stay in the good graces of the DOL and not incur any fines or worse, hurt your chances of getting H-2Bs in the future. So are the H-2Bs aware of the rate before they come? Yes, it's on their offer letters. Most of them have showed them to you. But there is some differences with tip positions. Tasha has a lot of experience with this with Anchorage by the Sea and F&B outlets and stuff. So I think I'll let her take over this section of it.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. So with the tipped positions, as most people are aware, you can use the tip credit to pay your tip staff, which would be half of the minimum wage. In Maine, that's $7.08 an hour. With an H-2B, the prevailing wages on tipped positions are still I would call it the minimum wage. So if that wage is for say like 1866, the prevailing wage of a server needs to be 1866 an hour. We can still use the tip credit to offset that. But instead of them having to make up to the minimum wage, which automatically shows up in your payroll, they need to make up to or more than the prevailing wage. So as long as they're averaging the prevailing wage across the week, we do have to still do it by week, just like a minimum wage would be, then we can pay them that lower tipped wage, like of the 708, or in Portland it's 750, or each state has its own wage that's required. So I know that Tracy has talked to some people about using a calculator just to confirm that they are making that prevailing wage. And that's kind of what we need to make that up. And so we would add pay to their paycheck if they do not make enough money in tips to cover that credit. But we don't have to pay them the 1866 plus the tips. We can definitely use the tip credit to just like we would any other tipped employee in the company. Claire?
And conversely, right, like we don't need to make them only make the prevailing wage, correct?
Correct. So it's just like any other tipped employee. If they average, $40 an hour, then that's what they make. All their tips are still put into their paycheck like we would anybody else. We just don't need to pay them that start wage plus tips.
Great. Thank you.
Tracy, do you have anything to add since you've been calculating?
Yeah, so I have a spreadsheet that Tasha was so kind to start in the beginning of the season that I started for a lot of properties that I caught that has tips added to their timesheets. I unfortunately don't catch all of them because I only look at the H-2Bs that have multiple locations. So if you have somebody, please reach out to me. Then we can set it up properly.
I would add just one sentence. It's kind of like a recap to the description that they gave. When a H-2B is looking at their pay stub, which they're all encouraged to do 100%, make sure that they're logging in and looking at that information. They're going to see an item if they had to have earnings added to get them up to that prevailing wage. That line item that's added to their pay is called incentive.
Yeah, and to add on to Deb, that's a good point, is I've explained some paychecks to some people, and if they just take their total earnings and divide it by their total hours, they will see that they do get that wage in the end, because the wage on their check will be listed as the tipped wage.
Exactly. Yep. They'll see
Right.
that. They'll see that like that 708 or whatever, and that throws them off.
Yes.
We've had quite a few people reach out, and that's kind of one of the reasons we're having this specifically about tip too, is we need to change the way we distribute the offer letters, I guess. Next year, we're going to try and explain it a little better, because what we put as the prevailing wage rate is what they're going to make, but it's not explained that on the paycheck it may show lower, and then with the tips, it will equal at least that, if not more. But that was not in the offer letter, so that is on us, and we will try to change that process next year. But I just want to make sure everyone's clear so that if they come to you, you can explain that. Okay. Polly, have anything to add?
All good. You guys
Okay.
doing great.
All right. So questions. Now it's you guys' turn.
And this can be
No.
for tipped wages, but it can also be anything related to H-2Bs too, since everybody's here. Sorry, Jeff. Didn't mean to cut you.
Absolutely.
I'll throw out something else. Well, if people are thinking about questions, this is a big one. Anybody that has H-2Bs, J1s, if they're in the system, in other words, they have a social security number, if they're in the system, you want to make a priority to get them using that time clock ASAP. And if you're needing to know what their time clock number is, people kind of make assumptions about what their time clock number should be. You can actually see that in M3. If you search their name by last name, there's columns on that employee record and timesheet screen that shows you exactly what their clock number is. So we really shouldn't have, as a rule, nobody should be inputting punches manually for an H-2B or J1 worker. They should be using the timesheet. You need to check it and make sure that the right job codes are chosen and all that, but they should be punching in themselves.
And if I can ask oh, go ahead, sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask Deb and Tracy also about direct deposits. How are we set with that?
As of last payroll, maybe because somebody else asked, I'm not sure, but Tracy did a pretty good job rounding up direct deposits. Last payroll was the first time this season that we didn't have a situation where property A had to ship a check to property B. That's the first time, and we're at the end of July, at beginning of July. So, yeah, we're trying to stay on top of that. And it's as important now as it is at the end of the season. These people, they leave the area.
Right.
Direct deposit is how they're going to get their pay. So,
Great job, everyone, getting that in. And thank you, Tracy, for following up.
Of course, everybody
Yep.
did it very well. It was a team effort.
Yep, for sure. The I think it should also be said for the J1s. I don't know if they're like still coming, but right now that seems to be the latest influx.
Mhm.
That it's just as important to get them in.
Yep.
And applying for their social security numbers ASAP and letting payroll know. I think another big thing that would be helpful is when an H-2B is asked to temporarily work at another location, if that general manager has an H-2B show up, make sure payroll's in the loop, because chances are you need a job code added so that they can punch in.
Right.
And I want to throw one
Rather
thing
than-
out there.
Yeah, rather
Sorry.
than just waiting till payroll day.
So
When
seeing
that,
their email and payroll are ready, can you let us know what they're doing at the location as well? So whatever job they're performing, because
Yeah.
that will help you guys with, when you're trying to do your payroll, instead of asking right when payroll's running for job codes to be added, we'll have it already in the system for you.
good one.
Proactive. I like it.
It's the plan.
Okay. I don't see many questions in the chat. Claire, did anyone submit any beforehand?
No, pretty quiet.
We're all experts at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Did everybody drink coffee this morning?
I know, it's very quiet. May I ask a question that is somewhat related to this? We were talking about ACH setup and stuff. Are there any missing social security numbers for any H-2B folks still?
That's a perpetual thing. There's always somebody that's in, that just arrived.
State Street Hill right here,
Are there any that have started working though?
right there. Yep.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
that's a ongoing thing.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, it's kind of a constant thing. Sometimes if you have a recent influx of new arrivals that don't have social security numbers, you might have a whole bunch of people in that situation. And that's why the focus is put on get their socials as soon as possible, because there's a tremendous amount of manual labor on everybody's, from the GM all the way through admin. There's a lot of extra manual work that has to happen to get those checks processed. But yeah, that's just a constant revolving door.
It also helps on the employee side because to explain the manual checks, it's very difficult as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yep, 100%. Yep. Yep, it's just better for everybody. It's expected that they may have one payroll that's having to be done as manual. And sometimes two, depending on how the timing works out, but it should never ever be more than that.
So the importance of the Social Security is partially payout and then also partially tracking, right?
I mean, I can't even tell you how much when you have to do a manual check for somebody, everything is getting done at least 2 or 3 times. I mean, people are having to touch stuff that wouldn't normally ever have to. It's just a tremendous amount of overhead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they can't use the time clock yet, so that's
Yep.
always a difficult piece.
Yeah, they don't exist on paper anywhere. And we all know in this day and age how think about how that impacts any type of process. If you're not in the computer nowadays, you don't count. So
And it's also a little legally not the best, right? Like if we're paying people, if we're having them work and they're not in the system yet.
Well,
It's
Well,
not the
we have the
best legally.
petition, so they're able to be here and stuff. It's just waiting through the process of slow government this year.
yeah. And I always have to say this whenever we talk H-2Bs, it blows me away. We all know, the government does its thing. They want to be collecting their tax monies. You would think that would be one of the cases where they'd roll out the red carpet. Sure, we'll give you a tax ID number. Yeah, you're on your way over. Here's a tax ID number because that's how they're going to get their taxes. So it amazes me that they haven't streamlined that process. But that's government.
Yeah. Any issues with rent collection or any questions regarding rent?
Good question.
I have been started visiting some of the properties, as you know. We need to kind of document and take some pictures of the housing to kind of see the status of it, what we need to prioritize for next year, that kind of stuff. So that's the reason. So if you haven't seen me yet, you probably will. But any questions regarding any of that or the flyer that I'd sent out that should be posted where they should be team members can see it? I'll take that as a no.
Any
Quiet
issues with
bunch.
how? Yeah. Any issues with like housing in general? Like not just payments, but like folks doing weird stuff or anything like that?
No, I really haven't come across much yet. But no,
Jeff,
it's
we'll
pretty
talk off.
straightforward.
We'll talk off
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
of this one.
I'm sure. That's
What are
fine.
the
I just kind of wanted to bring it up for anyone that may have any questions or anything.
I do
Hmm.
want to say one thing just so other people kind of are on the same thought process as us, because a lot of the housing might be separate from like the hotel.
Yep.
You should still consider it as part of the property. So whatever guidelines that we have that we would set for
Mhm.
the hotel, it
I
should
see.
be the same as for housing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Being proactive with that as well. Shouldn't be waiting for me to come take a look. You guys can pop your heads in and inspect. I mean, it is our property. They're signed a rental agreement along with the offer letter before they got here, and it does state on it that we will be visiting. We may do unannounced inspections. So they, although may not have read it, they were told. So if anyone brings that up, you can just explain that. But
what are the expectations for GMs for on-site inspections or anything like that? Are there any?
nothing specific. I mean, you got to treat it like it's your own. How often you inspect it, it's kind of up to the team members and up to you. But you shouldn't be waiting until the end of the season and say, "Hey, they trashed my housing. Can we get any money from them?" Well, no, they're already home. So we kind of need to be proactive, and I would do it once a month or so. But I mean, that's completely up to you. At the end of the day, it's just looking out for Gary's assets.
Okay, that's great. Any other stuff that you guys are seeing with pay? Like one of the things that I think we've talked about a little bit is seeing some hours for some people and like more hours for some people and less for others. Would you mind reiterating sort of our policy around, what hours we need to ensure people have?
Yeah, they basically they look at it as a rolling, what is it, 12-week. Um, I think what the average rate supposed average hours worked is supposed to be. So we kind of say at the beginning of the season it'll average out over the course of the season. So if they come to you and say I'm not getting enough hours, later on in the season they may be getting overtime. So that will kind of average out, but we need to think more short term. Is it going to average out over the next month? Is it going to average out over the next 2 months? We guarantee them 30 plus hours a week, but we need to make sure that's happening. Make sure, they're not getting any less than any other team member or that anything like that. So
And what is the minimum that they need to hit?
the average is, I believe, Tasha, is that 30?
26.25 would be,
Oh, for the
so if their petition says 35 hours, it will either say 35 or 40. If their petition says 35, then you can take the 35 and times it by 12, 35 divided by 12. I'm sorry, 35 times 12, and we have to guarantee them 3/4 of that. And so if you multiply it by 0.75, you get 26.25. Now, if their petition says 40 hours, it would be a little bit more. But as long as they're hitting 26.25 hours, they could work that the entire season, their entire time, and will have been within the law.
But if they work that, do you think they're coming back next year?
No. No,
As you know, they're all sending money back home and that kind of stuff, and they want to work as
exactly.
many hours as we'll get them. So it's
Yeah.
that's up to the operations and kind of balancing along with the other team members.
Yeah. I've always tried to, in the off season when it's super slow, no less than the 27-ish hours. And then they definitely, I would hope, are making it up in the middle.
Yeah.
But some people have gone down to like 20 because they're going to be working more within that 12-week period. But from my perspective, I just like to be safe. I think 27 is a good, easy number.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for confirming that. Oh, am I seeing a question finally?
Yeah.
Oh,
What
great.
she's asking, yeah, it is. Yeah, she's asking, Michelle's asking, how do you see what their average hours are? That does get a little gray because you could have a person that's working at multiple locations. And if that H-2B isn't assigned to your home location, they're not going to be able to see that person's pay history.
So I'd probably just, in a case by case basis, reach out.
Yeah, I mean, because yeah, that's what I would say. I don't think we're going to be turning around and running average hours reports for every H-2B every 5 minutes.
Right.
Great
Obviously,
question, though.
yeah, they can see their hours on their own pay stub. Which actually, this is a good time to mention that sometimes you will have managers asking about the H-2B is they're gonna go talk to the person that's at the property where they're physically working. And most of the time, that general manager doesn't have access to their pay stubs. But that H-2B does, and they're seeing it online, which is why they're having questions. They can show that information to their manager if they have questions. So the manager is not in the dark, I guess is what I'm trying to say, as to what they're looking at. But they will have access to their timesheet, and the timesheet's what usually answers most of their questions, unless they need to know something about rent. Sometimes that comes up.
Or taxes. That's always a question.
Yep, and that's definitely on their pay statement. Yep. True.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. Any others?
I'm not seeing any come through this form. I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, Bridget Conley asks, where would I find a copy of an H-2Bs offer letter?
Well, the H-2B should have it, but you can certainly reach out to me and I can provide a copy as well. You are very welcome.
And Bridget, and for everyone else, we're going to revise the offer letter process a little bit for this coming season so that you get a copy of that automatically when they sign it. So that'll change. But for now,
Always
we do have
adapting.
everyone. Yeah, exactly. Cool. Cool. Well, if there are no more questions,
I'm happy to stick on for a few minutes if you guys think of anything, and obviously always reach out, shoot me an email, me, Polly, Tracy, Deb, anybody. Reach out and we'll be happy to help.